Hey, it's Yay for Yarn, and today I'm going to show you how to crochet the Peaceful Moments Afghan. So the first thing you'll need for this project is the free written pattern, which you can get by clicking the first link in the description box down below, or you can grab the large print ad-free printable PDF version of the pattern with step-by-step photos in my shop, and that is at the second link in the description box down below. So this Afghan features a puff stitch pattern, and don't worry if you're not familiar with puff stitches, they're not very hard to do. But if you are familiar with pattern reading, particularly repeats with brackets and parentheses and things like that, then you can work this pattern. But if you're not as familiar with stitch pattern repeats in brackets and parentheses, then you'll definitely want to use the video to help you follow along and make sure that you've got all those repeats working out correctly. So let's get into what we're going to need to make this blanket. First of all, you're going to need some yarn. I am using Ice Yarns, and this is called Favorite Worsted. It's a 100% acrylic yarn, and it comes in 100-gram skeins. And I have 8 skeins of this, so you're going to need a total of 1,832 yards of a number 4 worsted weight yarn. This one is acrylic. If you want to use acrylic, go for it, but you could use a different fiber if you want to. But this is just a washable acrylic, very inexpensive. I actually have a video on my channel about ice yarns if you want to go and check them out. I'll give a link to this yarn in the description box as well. But this yarn is very soft, very smooth, and you could substitute any smooth, soft worsted weight yarn. But anyway, I have 8 skeins of Ice Yarns Favorite Worsted, and by the way, I should mention here that Ice Yarns sent me this yarn for this design, so thank you to Ice Yarns for providing the yarn for this design. But like I said, you'll need 832 yards of your favorite number 4 worsted weight yarn. This colorway is called Powder Pink, so I'll go ahead and link that down below. So I've got 8 skeins of my worsted weight acrylic. You'll also need a crochet hook, of course. This is a size I or 5.5mm crochet hook. This is my Furls Odyssey. I use this all the time. I have a video on these hooks as well if you want to go and check out my review on those. And then you'll also need some scissors, a yarn needle or blunt tapestry needle, a measuring tape, and one more thing that you'll need that I don't have on the table right now is some sort of small book or a thick piece of cardboard that you can cut to certain measurements so that you can use some kind of sturdy, flat object to wrap your yarn around when we make the tassels at the end of our blanket. So as always, you'll want to check your gauge before beginning the project. So there is a pattern as far as written instructions included for how to make a gauge swatch in this stitch pattern, and then it also includes instructions for blocking your swatch to make sure that you get the most accurate gauge measurement as possible. If you're not familiar with gauge, I also have a video on that, so go ahead and check the link in the description box below if you're not familiar with gauge. So now that we have all of our supplies, we can start working the pattern. So first things first, this pattern does not begin with a foundation chain. It begins with a row of foundation double crochet, which is a way of working the first row of double crochet and the foundation chain at the same time. And this gives a much stretchier finished edge than working with a foundation chain. So if you're not familiar with the foundation double crochet, I am going to demonstrate it briefly here, but I also have an entire video with a free printable cheat sheet on the foundation stitches and how to work them. So I will link that in the description box as well. And I highly recommend that you use the foundation double crochet because it does produce a nice, clean, stretchy edge that you just can't get with a foundation chain. But if you're not comfortable with the foundation double crochet, the pattern also includes instructions for how to do it with a regular foundation chain and a row of double crochet. So what we're about to work here is row 1. I'm going to go ahead and leave a tail and start crocheting. So I'm going to start by chaining 3. And we're going to work our first foundation double crochet into that 3rd chain from the hook. So I'm going to yarn over. I'm going to insert my hook into that 3rd chain, the very first one that I made, yarn over and pull up a loop. Right now it looks just like a regular double crochet, right? Well, now we're going to add the chain part. So I'm going to yarn over, pull through one loop on my hook, which creates the chain underneath the stitch. Then I'm going to yarn over, pull through 2 loops, and yarn over, pull through 2 loops. So that is my first foundation double crochet of my row. Now we're going to work the second one, and for all the following stitches we're going to be working into the base of the previous stitch. So I'm going to yarn over, and I'm going to come down here. If this is the top of my stitch, which it is, I'm going to turn it upside down so you can see the bottom of the stitch and the chain that we made on the bottom of the previous stitch. And it has a front strand and a back strand. It looks a lot like the top of a regular crochet stitch. I'm going to insert my hook through both strands of that, yarn over, pull up a loop, and again, because this is a foundation double crochet and not a regular double crochet, we're going to yarn over, pull through 1 loop, then we're going to yarn over, pull through 2 loops, and yarn over, pull through 2 loops. So again, I'm going to yarn over, insert my hook into both strands at the bottom of the previous stitch. Looks like the top of a regular stitch. Yarn over, pull up 1 loop, yarn over, pull through 1 loop, that's the chain, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, yarn over, pull through 2 loops. So this one right here was my first foundation double crochet. The chains that we started with do not count as a stitch here. So here's my first foundation double crochet. I've worked 2 more, but for this pattern, the pattern says to work 153 more foundation double crochet after that first one. So I've got the first one and then 2 more. I need to work until I've got a total of 154 foundation double crochet, including the first one, but not including these chains right here. So I'm going to continue working across, adding more foundation double crochet to my row until I have a total of 154 stitches. Now, if you would like to adjust the size of the blanket and make it larger or smaller or whatever, the instructions do tell you how to do that. You'll need to start with a multiple of 21 stitches plus 7. So basically any number of stitches that you can divide evenly by 21 and then add 7 to that total number. But for the size of the blanket given in the pattern, we need to start with 154 total foundation double crochet in the first row. So I'm going to continue working foundation double crochet until I have a total of 154 foundation double crochet stitches in my row. Alright, so I've finished my row of foundation double crochet. That is row 1. Now, if you have followed the instructions for the foundation chain and then a row of double crochet, that will also be your row 1, and you should still have the same number of stitches. So now we're ready to move on to row 2, and for row 2, it's basically a double crochet all the way across row. So we're going to start by turning the work, and we're going to begin our row with a chainless starting double crochet. Now, if you're not familiar with this stitch, I have several videos on the chainless starting stitches. I will link one down below. But a chainless starting double crochet is a way of working a stitch that functions as a turning chain by getting you up to the height you need for the row, but it looks like a double crochet. So what we're going to do, I'm going to demonstrate this briefly. If you want more information on this stitch, I'm going to link the video that I have on these stitches down below, and you can go check that out for more information. But I'm going to go ahead and stretch the loop on my hook until it's about the height of a regular double crochet. So you can see how long that is. I'm going to take my index finger on my hand that's holding the hook and kind of step on that loop to hold it still while I work the next step of the stitch. So I'm going to bring my crochet hook tip towards me, making sure that that loop doesn't move. The part of the loop that's on the back of the hook should stay on the back of the hook. I'm going to bring my hook tip towards me, down, and then back behind that stretched out loop so that it's kind of like yarning over with that stretched out loop. Then I'm going to insert my hook into the very same stitch that my yarn is coming from, yarn over, pull up 1 loop. Then I'm going to yarn over and pull through the first loop and that yarn over from the stretched out loop. And then I'm going to yarn over and pull through 2 loops. So that creates what looks like a double crochet, but we got up to the height for our row without a turning chain. And this just neatens up the edge quite a bit and avoids those gaps or wavy edges on the sides of your work. So now that I've got that chainless starting double crochet done, I worked that in the same stitch that my yarn was coming from. Now I'm just going to work a regular double crochet in each stitch across the entire row. So I'm going to go ahead and double crochet across in every stitch, and then I'll show you what that looks like, and we'll move on to row 3. Alright, so I've made it to the end of my row 2 right here, and now we're ready to move on to row 3. Now, I don't normally do this, but I have the written instructions for row 3 here on paper so that you can follow along with exactly what I'm doing as I'm working across this row. Now, like I said, I don't normally do this, but with this particular pattern, the stitches themselves are not difficult to work, and the repeats are not difficult to work either, but they are a little bit long. The repeats in the pattern are long. So I'm going to kind of walk you through how we are reading this if you're not familiar with how to read repeats in brackets, parentheses, and with asterisks, and etc. So we're going to go through this whole row step by step by step and break down what each little section of this repeat is. So the first step in my row is to turn. This is row 3. We're going to CSSC in the same stitch. So CSSC is the chainless starting single crochet. If you're not familiar with this, I have a video on that. But basically all that means is that we're going to stretch the loop on the hook a little bit and work a regular single crochet in the same space. But by stretching the loop on the hook, we can eliminate having to chain before we work the first stitch of our row. So I've worked that CSSC, or chainless starting single crochet, in the same stitch, and then the pattern tells me to puff stitch in the same stitch. So I'm going to go back into that same stitch I just worked into, and I'm going to do a puff stitch. Now for the puff stitch, we're going to yarn over, insert the hook into the same stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, insert the hook into the same stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then one more time we're going to yarn over, insert the hook into the same stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop. And we want the loops to be just as high as the rest of the stitches. Then we're going to yarn over and pull through all the loops on the hook. So that is a puff stitch. So the next part of the instructions begins with an asterisk. So that means that between this asterisk and the next one, we're going to be repeating this sequence multiple times. So we're going to skip a stitch. So I'm going to skip this next stitch right here that I have not worked into yet. And then it says to single crochet and puff stitch in the next stitch. That's what these parentheses are for. So the parentheses, these little curved lines right here, tells us to do a couple different things all in one stitch. So I'm going to skip that first stitch right here. Then I'm going to work a single crochet and a puff stitch in the next stitch. All right, so we'll go over that puff stitch again in just a second, but it says repeat from asterisk to asterisk 3 more times. So that means I'm going to go back to these instructions that start and end with the asterisk, and I'm going to do this skip 1 stitch, single crochet, puff stitch in the next stitch 3 more times. So I'm going to skip this stitch, work a single crochet and a puff stitch, and again that's a yarn over, insert hook into that stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, insert hook into the same stitch again, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, insert into the same stitch again, yarn over, pull up a loop. Then we're going to yarn over and pull through all the loops on the hook. So that was the first time I repeated it. So now I have to do it 2 more times. Skip 1 stitch, single crochet, and a puff stitch in the next stitch. And then 1 more, skip 1 stitch, single crochet and puff stitch in the next stitch. All right, so what we've done is this was our first puff stitch. You should have 5 at the beginning of this row. Single crochet in the same stitch right here, chainless starting single crochet in the same stitch, puff stitch in the same stitch. That's what this is right here. Then we worked this in the asterisk the first time, and then we repeated it 3 more times. 1, 2, 3. So now we have brackets, and the brackets are a longer repeat. So this starts a new set of instructions that we're going to be repeating. So this one says to first skip 1 stitch. I'm going to skip this next stitch, then HDC or half double crochet in the next 7 stitches. So there's my skipped stitch right here, and I'm going to half double crochet in the next 7. It's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So now after I've half double crocheted in the next 7, it tells me to single crochet puff stitch in the next stitch. So I'm going to work a single crochet and a puff stitch, just as we did before. And then I'm going to repeat from asterisk to asterisk 6 more times. So the asterisk instructions are not inside the brackets, but because we're being asked to repeat the ones in the asterisks 6 more times, we're going to come back up here to where we gave the instructions for the asterisks, and that is to again skip 1 stitch and then single crochet puff stitch in the next stitch. So that's single crochet and a puff stitch. So I'm going to skip a stitch, then I'm going to work a single crochet and a puff stitch, and again that's just to yarn over, insert the hook into that same stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, insert into the same stitch again, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, insert into the same stitch again, and yarn over, pull up a loop. Then we'll yarn over and pull through all the loops on the hook. So that was the first time I repeated this skip 1 stitch, single crochet, and puff stitch in the next stitch. So I have to do that 5 more times. So I'm going to skip a stitch, single crochet and puff stitch in the next stitch, skip a stitch, single crochet and puff stitch in the next stitch. So what we've got here so far is that in the brackets, this is our HDC in next 7, we did that back here. And then we single crochet puff stitch in the next stitch. So that's this one right here, this pair of stitches. Then it says to do that skip 1 stitch, single crochet puff stitch in next stitch 6 more times. So I've got 1, 2, 3 more times. That means I have to keep going. So I'm going to skip 1, single crochet and puff stitch in the next stitch. That was 4, skip 1, single crochet, puff stitch in the next stitch. That's 5, skip 1 stitch, single crochet and puff stitch in the next stitch. So now we have a total of 7 puff stitches in a row. As far as what's visible, there are single crochets in there too, but we have 7 puffs in a row. So that's the end of our repeat from asterisk to asterisk 6 more times. And now we've come to the end of the brackets. So that means that's the end of what we're going to repeat. And we're going to repeat the instructions in the brackets 6 times. So we've done it once already. We're going to do it 6 times total. Not 6 more times, 6 times total. So I'm going to come back here again to the beginning of the brackets. And then I'm going to skip 1 stitch, half double crochet in the next 7 stitches. So skip 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 half double crochet. Then I'm going to single crochet and puff stitch in the next stitch. There we go. All right, and now I need to repeat what's in the asterisks 6 more times. So I'm going to skip 1 stitch, single crochet and puff stitch in the next stitch. That's 1, skip 1 stitch, single crochet and puff stitch in the next stitch. That's 2, skip 1 stitch, single crochet and puff stitch in the next stitch. That's 3, skip 1, single crochet and puff stitch in the next stitch. That's 4, skip 1, single crochet and puff stitch in the next stitch. That's 5, skip 1, single crochet and puff stitch in the next stitch. That is 6. So again, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 puffs in a row. So now I'm to the end of the brackets again. I have to come back to the beginning of the brackets and repeat that some more. So that was the second time I worked the instructions in the brackets. So I'm going to work those instructions in the brackets 4 more times so that I have a total of 6 times. And as I mentioned, when it comes and says repeat from asterisk to asterisk 6 more times, you're always going to come back to the instructions that we had at the beginning of the row where it gives what's inside these asterisks and use that as what you're repeating here. So I'm going to go ahead and work the instructions in the brackets 4 more times so that I will have worked it a total of 6 times, and then we'll finish up the row. Alright, so I finished repeating the instructions in the brackets 6 times total, and let's just look at what's in the brackets so that we can count how many times we've done that, just so that you fully understand how the stitch pattern is going to work here. So we begin the instructions in the brackets by skipping 1 and half double crocheting in the next 7, and then we have this row of what is 7 total puffs in the row, all in one little section. So we're going to go back to the beginning, and the first time that we do that half double crochet in the next 7 is in that brackets. So here we are. Here's the beginning of our first repeat in the brackets. So we've done it 1, that's the end of the last puff stitch in that section, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So now we've done the instructions in the brackets 6 times. Now we're going to skip 1, half double crochet in the next 7 stitches. So I'm going to skip that stitch right there, and then half double crochet in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And now what it says to do next is single crochet and puff stitch in the next stitch. So I'm going to work that single crochet and the puff stitch in the next stitch. Then it says to repeat from asterisk to asterisk 4 more times. So I'm going to come back up here to the instructions inside the asterisks, skip 1 stitch, single crochet, puff stitch in the next stitch 4 times. So skip 1, single crochet and a puff stitch in the next stitch, that's 1 time, 2, 3, 4. So we've just worked what's in the asterisks up here 4 times. Now we're going to skip 1 and half double crochet in the last stitch. So I'm going to skip this stitch right here and half double crochet in the very last stitch of the row, which is my chainless starting double crochet from the previous row. Looks very much like the top of a regular stitch when you work into it. So now you should have 154 stitches. So that's how we're going to be working row 3. So for row 4, we're going to repeat row 3. So I'm going to go ahead and work row 3 again for my next row, which will be row 4, and then we'll move on to rows 5 and 6. Alright, so I finished working my row 4, which is to repeat row 3, and as you can see, we have all of these pairs of puff stitches now. So the puff stitches from row 3 kind of line up with the puff stitches from row 4. And that's what gives us this beautiful textured stitch pattern. And when we go to block this at the end of the project, we can kind of, like I just did, push the puff stitches to the one side as far as to the front or to the back, because the back side of the puff stitches tends to be more raised from the fabric, whereas the front side that we just did, the front side just facing us of this row, tend to kind of go the other way. They kind of push back the other way. So we can kind of pop them to one side or the other, and we'll do that when we block our Afghan. But now that I've finished row 4, we're going to go ahead and work rows 5 and 6. And for rows 5 and 6, we're just going to repeat row 2. So again, row 2 is to turn. We're going to work that chainless starting double crochet in the same stitch. So I'm going to stretch the loop on my hook. I'm going to hold on to it with my index finger. I'm going to yarn over with that stretched loop, insert the hook into the same stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. That's our chainless starting double crochet. And then we're just going to double crochet in each stitch across this entire row. So I'm going to go ahead and do that for rows 5 and 6, and then we'll move on to row 7. Alright, so I've finished with rows 5 and 6, and now we're ready to move on to row 7. So for row 7, we're going to actually begin with a chain stitch, not because we couldn't use a chainless starting half double crochet, but because the chainless starting half double crochet is best suited for when you're working in the round, and you have a way to secure that stitch permanently once you work into the top of it so that it won't come untwisted. With the edge of a piece, if you use a chainless starting half double crochet on the edge, it can get just a little bit loose because we're not using it in the round where it's getting joined to at the end of the round. So since we're working in rows here, we're just going to chain 1 and turn. That chain does not count as a stitch. We're going to half double crochet in the same stitch that the chain was in, and half double crochet in each of the next 6 stitches. Alright, so now we're going to begin the instructions in the brackets. So in the brackets, immediately after that first bracket, we have a set of parentheses that tells us to single crochet and puff stitch in the next stitch. So we're going to work the single crochet and the puff stitch into the next stitch. Then we have the asterisk. So we're going to start from the asterisk, we're going to skip 1, single crochet, puff stitch in the next stitch. So skip 1, then we're going to work the single crochet and the puff stitch in the next stitch. And it says to repeat from asterisk to asterisk 5 more times. So I'm going to do that 5 more times. Skip 1, single crochet and puff stitch in the next stitch. That's 1, skip 1, single crochet and puff stitch in the next stitch. That's 2, skip 1, single crochet and puff stitch in the next stitch. That's 3, and then we'll do it 2 more times. All right, and again we have a total of 7 puffs in a row. And now that we've done that little sequence in the asterisks 5 more times, now we can skip 1 and half double crochet in the next 7 stitches. Alright, so that sequence in the brackets from here to here is what we're going to repeat, but it doesn't tell us how many times. It tells us to do what's in the brackets to the end of the row. So we're going to continue repeating what's in these brackets from here to here until we get to the end of the row, because the very last thing we're going to do at the end of the row is that half double crochet in the next 7 stitches. So we're going to go ahead and repeat the sequence in the brackets all the way to the end of the row, and then I'll meet you back here and we'll show you what that looks like and how we're going to work row 8. Alright, so that was the end of row 7. We ended on that half double crochet in the next 7 stitches, and now we're ready to move on to row 8. So for row 8, we're going to again chain 1 and turn, half double crochet in the same stitch, and in each of the next 5 stitches. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And now here we have the brackets again. This row is very similar to the previous row. It just has to be offset by 1 stitch to get the stitch pattern to work out right. So this is a very similar repeat to what we just did in row 7. So for this one, we're going to start here at the brackets now. Single crochet and puff stitch in the next stitch. Alright, and then we're going to, now we've got these asterisks here, we're going to skip 1 stitch, single crochet puff stitch in the next stitch, and then we're going to repeat that from the asterisk to the other asterisk 5 more times. So it's a total of 6 times. I'm going to skip 1, work a single crochet, and a puff stitch in the next stitch, and then I'm going to do that 5 more times. So skip 1, single crochet, and a puff stitch in the next stitch, and continue till I've done that as many times as the pattern calls for. And again, we should have the same number of puffs, 7. We always have 7 puffs in a row, except for here on these rows 3 and 4 where the puffs kind of stick off the edge like they would if they were kind of running off the edge of the fabric. But everywhere else we will always have 7 puffs in one little section, and they should stack directly on top of the ones in the previous row. So now that we've done that puff stitch sequence 5 more times, we're going to skip 1 stitch and half double crochet in the next 7. So skip 1, half double crochet in the next 7. Alright, so now that was the end of our bracket repeat. So we're going to repeat what's in the brackets until there's 1 stitch left in the row. So once we reach that bracket, the second one right there, we're going to come back up to the first one and start that again. So we're going to do the section of puff stitches and then the section of half double crochets. So I'm going to continue repeating what's in the brackets until there's 1 stitch left in my row, and then we're going to half double crochet in the last stitch of the row. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then row 8 will be finished, and we'll move on to rows 9 and 10. Alright, so that is the end of row 8, and now for rows 9 and 10, we're going to repeat row 2, and that's the one where we just double crochet all the way across. So I'm going to go ahead and work rows 9 and 10, which is just to repeat row 2, and then I'll show you what that full repeat looks like. Alright, so I have finished working rows 9 and 10, which are these 2 double crochet rows right here. And now what we're going to do, we have the basic puff stitch design established. Now we're going to repeat rows 3 to 10 9 more times. So this right here is row 3. So we're basically going to repeat the section from here to here 9 more times. And that will give us almost the full size of our blanket. So I'm going to go ahead and repeat rows 3 to 10 9 more times, and then I will show you what that looks like, and we'll move on to the last few rows. Alright, so now that I've finished repeating rows 3 to 10, the correct number of times for the pattern, what I'm going to do next is repeat just rows 3 to 6 one more time, and those will be the last few rows of our blanket. And what that's going to do is that's just going to finish out our pattern so that the bottom edge of the blanket and the top edge of the blanket will match. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to work the next few rows so that we have another pair of rows where the clusters come all the way to the edge. As you can see right here, at the end of my last repeat, this is rows 7 and 8 right here. The clusters do not come all the way to the edge on these 2 rows. So we're going to work rows 3 to 6 one more time so that the edges of the blanket, both at the top and at the bottom, will match. So I'm going to go ahead and repeat rows 3 to 6 one more time. And then what we're going to do next is tie off and weave in the ends and block our blanket. Alright, so now I have finished repeating rows 3 to 6 for the last time, and we've ended with our double crochet rows. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and leave a tail, cut my yarn, and tie off. Alright, so the next step, we are done with the crochet hook for the moment. The next step is to weave in our ends and block our Afghan. So as you can see right now, I kind of have some ends hanging loose here where I've changed skeins of yarn, but I didn't actually weave them in at the time. So now I'm going to go ahead and weave in all of those ends, and then I'm going to block my Afghan. Now if you're not familiar with blocking, I do have a video on blocking your crochet. I will put a link to that in the description box down below. But I'm going to go ahead and steam block my Afghan, and I'm going to choose to steam block it because I'm working with an acrylic yarn, and acrylic yarns really like to be steam blocked. Now, if you would prefer, you could, if your yarn is machine washable, just throw this in the washing machine and it would be technically blocked. But For this particular Afghan, I am going to go ahead and steam block it with a steamer or a steam iron because if you look closely at the texture of this fabric, let's look at these puff stitches. You can see how that the back of the puff stitch rows, it kind of pops to the back of the fabric, but the other row, which is the one right below it, this one is the front of that row, facing up on this side. So on this side, the back of that row pops out more. So as I block my Afghan, I'm going to take my finger and just kind of push all of the puff stitches towards the same side of the fabric. So all the puff stitches that are receding and kind of hiding back in there, I'm going to push them forward with my finger as I'm blocking, and that will help them stay all on the front side of the work. It doesn't matter which side you choose to be the front side of your work because both sides are right now exactly the same. But we want to make sure that all our puff stitches are kind of popping to whichever side we choose to be the front of the work. So that's why I'm not going to block it in the washing machine, because I want to be able to control the puff stitches and make sure that they get popped forward in the fabric so that they can stand out and really show off that texture instead of receding back into the work. So I'm going to steam block my Afghan, popping all of those puff stitches to the same side of the fabric, and then we will go ahead and add our tassels. Alright, so I have my blanket finished, woven in all of the ends, and I've blocked it, pulling all of those little puff stitches to the same side of the work. And one little trick that I found helpful is to take a little yarn needle and just kind of insert the yarn needle into that puff stitch and just kind of tug it upward from the rest of the fabric, and that helps lift it up before you block that section of the fabric and helps them pop to the same side of the work. So now that my Afghan is blocked, it's time to add the tassels. So I'm not going to demonstrate how to make tassels in this video because I already have a video showing how to make tassels. So I will link that video in the description box down below if you want to learn how to make tassels. But what I'm going to do is take a approximately 5-inch piece of cardboard or a small book of some sort that is about 5 inches wide, and I'm going to wrap the yarn around that piece of cardboard or the book about 15 or 16 times per tassel, so one time meaning around the front and around the back. So I would do that 15 or 16 times and then finish creating the tassel according to the instructions in my How to Make Tassels video. And we're going to need a total of 12 tassels for this blanket. So I'm going to go ahead and make my 12 tassels according to those instructions, and then I'll show you how we're going to attach them to the blanket. Alright, now I've got all of my tassels made and we're ready to attach them to our blanket. So we're going to be using the 2 longer strings at the top of each tassel to attach the tassels to the edge of the fabric. So we're going to start by adding one to the corner, and then I'll show you where we're going to space out the rest of them along the edge. So we're going to add these to the edge where it looks like the puff stitches are kind of running off of this edge. So right here we have the ends of the rows. This is the edge that we're going to be attaching our tassels to. So obviously my blanket is folded and you can't really see the whole thing right now, but we're going to take the tassels and we're going to put one on each corner of the blanket, and then on the ends of the rows we're going to be spacing out tassels along this edge. Alright, so I've got a yarn needle here, and I prefer the metal ones, that's just what I like to use, but whatever kind of yarn needle you have will work fine for this. And I should mention here that my tassels are already steamed and trimmed, and the steaming helps relax the yarn and make it lay nice and straight, and the trimming just makes it even across the bottom. So I've trimmed my tassels to a final length of 4.5 inches from the very top to the bottom. So I'm going to separate the 2 ends of the yarn that are holding the top of that tassel together. They are securely tied already. but I'm going to separate those two ends and work with them one at a time. So I'm going to thread one of these ends through my yarn needle. Then I'm going to come over here to the corner of my blanket. So this is the corner where I'm going to attach my first tassel, and I'm just going to insert my needle into that corner. So what I'm going to do is with this first tail of the yarn, I'm going to bring the yarn up through the fabric towards me and then down through the top of the tassel. And when I go through the top of the tassel, I'm going underneath that strand of yarn that holds the top of the tassel together. So now I'm going to come back up through the corner of the blanket and then down through the top of the tassel, back up through the corner of the blanket, and then down through the top of the tassel. So I'm going to do that a couple of times, and then I'm going to let go of that strand of yarn with my needle. I'm just going to let go of it. So for that strand, we came up and then went back down through the tassel. So for this other strand, I'm going to pick that second one up now and put it into my yarn needle. For this strand, we are going to go in the opposite direction. We're going to go down through the blanket and then up through the top of the tassel. So I'm going to do that a couple times, going down through the blanket, up through the tassel. Let's just do one more for good measure. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and bring my piece of yarn that I'm currently working with to the back, going back down through the fabric. And then I can flip this over, and both strands are on the same side of the work. So now I can tie those together in a double knot to make sure they are securely finished off. And then what I'm going to do next is weave in these two yarn tails. So I like to weave them in separately, not both in the same place, because that just helps minimize the bulk and makes it closer to being invisible where you weave in the tails. So that is the first tassel securely attached to the corner of my blanket. I will weave in the tails later. So now what we're going to do is space them out along the edge. Now, you don't have to measure out how long the edge is and then put a tassel every so many inches. What we're going to be doing is putting a tassel at the end of particular rows. So if we look at the stitch pattern right here, you'll notice that on some of the rows, the puff stitches go all the way to the edge, and on some of them they don't. So rows 7 and 8 are these two rows right here, where the puff stitches stop before they get to the edge, and the end of the row is half double crochet. So on the ends of rows 7 and 8, where the puff stitches do not meet the edge of the blanket, we're going to attach a tassel right there. So again, I'm going to separate the two yarn strands at the top, thread one into my yarn needle, and I like to just come right in between those two rows, kind of like on the border line in between the two rows. Right about there. I'm going to come up through the blanket, down through the top of the tassel, up through the blanket, down through the tassel, and I'm going to do that just a couple of times. All right, and then back down through the tassel. Then I'm going to take my yarn needle with the other tail of yarn, and I'm going to take this one down through the blanket edge and up through the tassel. And I'm just going to go around the top of that a couple of times. All right, then I can bring that yarn to the back of the work and then turn it over and tie those tails together in a double knot. And the reason this works is because the tails were coming from different directions. They were kind of wrapped through the top of the tassel in different directions. So when we tie that together, we've got two yarn tails coming from different directions as opposed to two yarns coming from the same place, where if we tied those together in a knot, it wouldn't actually do anything to secure. So then I can also weave in those tails. Or if you'd rather, and your tails are long enough, you could even take the yarn tails and just bring them down underneath this center point where that the yarn is wrapped. Now my tails are not quite long enough for that. You can do that anyway if you want to, because they won't really show too much if you just have one or two that are shorter on the inside. But I want to maintain a consistent straight across the bottom cut look to my tassels, so I am going to go ahead and weave all of these in individually. But you could, if you wanted to, and if your yarn tails are long enough, just pull them through the rest of the tassel and it'll just disappear right into the work. So I am going to continue adding a tassel to the end of rows 7 and 8, the end of row 7 and 8, end of row 7 and 8, until I get all the way across this edge of the blanket, and then another tassel will go on the corner, and then I will repeat those same steps again to add all the tassels to the other edge of the blanket, the opposite edge, where the other ends of all the rows are. So I'm going to go ahead and finish adding all of my tassels to the blanket, and then I'm going to weave in my tails and my Afghan will be finished. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. If you make this project, let me know how it turns out for you in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe, making sure you click the little bell next to the subscribe button to be notified of new videos. Thanks for watching.